All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Consistency Corner podcast. I am really excited for this conversation today. I know I say that every week, but I have been looking forward to this conversation. Elizabeth and I have actually worked together a little bit. I reached out to her and asked her to be on the show because she does such a great job with up-leveling the client experience and understanding how to use your online tools to create an amazing branded client experience. And so we're going to talk all about that today with my guest, Elizabeth Averyanova, who's a web designer, brand strategist, and founder of the design and branding agency Studio Classica. And she's actually living in Europe. And we were just chatting before we hit record about she went to Notre Dame, I went to Purdue. We both have Indiana roots, but she has really lived that laptop lifestyle and relocated to Europe and serves clients all over the world today. But as a fellow mompreneur, she understands the balance of juggling the building your business with building your family and wanting to truly serve your clients in a way that reflects your brand. And she does actually help her clients do that through the web design and client experience that her team leads. So, Elizabeth, I'm really excited to have you here on the podcast today. Thank you so much for being on the show. Can you tell us a little bit more about you and your business journey?
Yes, thank you, Ruthie. And I'm excited to be here. And thanks for listening to this episode. And yes, so my business journey started over a decade ago. And in 2012, I basically met my future husband. I quit my dream job. I left Miami, Florida, where we were living, which is so beautiful of a place. And I booked a one-way flight to Europe and had no plan. And from that, my husband and I, we like created our design business as it is today, but that took a decade of building it and figuring out what works, what doesn't work. But since the beginning, honestly, client experience has been such a big part of our values and the way we work since the very beginning. And I just attribute so much of our success to caring about the client experience and the client happiness and the final result since the very beginning. So
Yeah.
our business has really evolved so much over this decade, but that's the very short version.
Yeah. And it's funny, you and we connected. We originally connected. I heard you on a podcast, Taylor Mobley's podcast, Hustle Like a Mother. And I was like, oh, she specializes in Kajabi design. Like I had just signed up to use Kajabi, or maybe I was like still deciding. I'm not even sure. But you do such a great job of thinking about how the tech tools serve the client experience. Because I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot of tech tools out there. A lot of them do the same thing. And sometimes it's figuring out like which one works best for your brain, which works best with the other tools that you have. But at the end of the day, with any tech tool, you have to think about that client journey. So talk to me a little bit about how you approach that from a design perspective and how you work with your clients on thinking about the client journey.
Right. So when I start working with a new client, I really want to know more about first off who their ideal client is because that really determines a lot of things. And so really understanding who your ideal client is and how they work and like where do they show up online, what's the best sort of simplified experience for that person. That's really the starting point of that. And then the second part of where I start always is what are your current offers or what do you currently offer in your business? Is it a coaching program? Is it a course? Is it something, or maybe you don't offer it yet, but that's the first thing you want to offer? Or is it a brick and mortar business, which I don't typically work with, but I know you do? Where do those clients come from and what's your main service? So I really need to understand that before we start to visualize what's that client experience going to be.
Yeah. And I think that's something understanding the who is the ideal client. Because there are a lot of people that can build a great website. There's 1,000 million great websites out there. But if the website isn't designed for the end user, it doesn't matter how great the design is. It has to be designed in mind for that like ideal customer. And we talk a lot about this on the podcast about really understanding who your ideal customer is. And I have worked with design partners and marketing partners throughout my career who don't ask that question. And so I love that you start with that question because like that's what really matters is who's the end user and what type of experience are they looking for. Um Kajabi in particular, it has courses and email and communities and all of these things. Talk to me a little bit about whether it's in Kajabi or using other tech tools, how having consistent branding across all of your client touch points can help elevate that experience.
Yeah. So the branding is the core piece of the whole operations, I would say. And so when you're really thinking about who your ideal client is, you want to think about what's that first step of how they're going to inquiry with you, or what's that first step for them to work with you. And where are those people coming from? And is it social media? Is it through Google search, through your website? Is it through podcasting? And so you really want to understand where those clients are coming from. And then what's that first step for them to work with you? And of course, we can talk about this more, but then you want to really understand every step after that. And a part of that then would be making sure every step of that is consistent and branded. And the reason that's so important is you want to make sure that you build up that trust and authority with the clients. And what I see, the biggest mistake I see is not having consistent branding visually. What happens is people think they're in the wrong place. They're not really sure. They're actually confused, like, oh, am I in the right place? I thought I was going to this, but now it looks kind of different, and they drop off, or they end up not choosing to work with you, and they go with somebody else.
Another thing
So
I think
yeah,
about,
go ahead.
I had some conversations with people recently about this with consistent branding. The more content is out in the world, the more content we're consuming. I mean, there's like 80 different TV platforms and there's 10 different social platforms. So we as humans are consuming a lot of content and our brains get really full. And so there might be somebody who you've come across who you're like, oh, I wanted to work with that person. Like, what was her name? Like, you want to look her up because you want to work with her. Or maybe somebody's asking you, like, oh, I need such and such service. Do you know anybody? And you're like, oh, I do. But you can't remember their name or you can't remember where you saw them. And consistent branding helps to build those like memorable experiences. There was just somebody the other day that I was talking to a friend about. We were talking about podcast strategy. And there's somebody that I follow that I'm connected with in a couple of communities. And I was like, oh, you should talk to her. And then I could not remember what her handle was. And I'm like, I can picture her colors, I can picture her face, but I don't know her handle to refer. But the fact that I could remember those details, then the next time her post actually popped up in my feed, I was like, oh, yes, that's who it was. And I immediately sent it to my friend. And had she just posted a random photo that didn't have any brand details, it wouldn't have triggered those memories for me. And so I love how you think about every single touch point reinforcing those brand details.
Yeah, absolutely. And the social media is your starting point. I so often see the social media on your Instagram posts not being consistent with the website. And at a basic level, you need to get that down. If you want to be successful in your online business, make sure your initial Instagram posts match the website. And I just see it happen all the time that it doesn't match.
Yes. And pro tip here, bonus tip for anybody who has DIY'd your website, please check the social link buttons and make sure they go to your social and not the platforms. At least once a week, I click on somebody's website, decide I want to check out their social, click on the button, and it takes me to like Wix's Instagram. And I'm like, don't do that.
Exactly. Yes. Or it's a broken link or an outdated handle that you might have had in the
Yeah.
past.
And that's one of the advantages of working with a team, a designer, because you have somebody to help you see those things and check those types of things. I know when we are DIYing it, we're looking at so many different things that to have like a second person walk through that customer journey with you can be really helpful because there just might be things that you're not thinking of because at the end of the day, you're not the client. So you don't even really maybe even know every single step a client is going to go through, the questions they're going to ask, the things they're going to want to click on and wonder. So having somebody to kind of walk through that with you, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, it can be hard to see your own business and to see your own customer journey. But
Mm-hmm.
if at all possible, I recommend from your Instagram profile, if that's the main place where you show up online, try to do an audit and click and on your link in bio, click and see what it looks like visually. Then click on the next step. What does that look like? Then click on the next step and go through your own process. I think so often we sort of put it up and it's a couple months old or a year old, and we don't audit our own process. So that is something I just have done in my own business, is gone through every single step of our inquiry process, our sales process, and our onboarding process, and just completely revamped every touch point and took it to a next level.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're right. A lot of times, like a link can change or something, needs to be updated. And we forget those little places that it could be. I mean, even from a customer experience, this is something that I learned from your team. After you check out, like, what does the thank you page look like? What does the delivery email look like? What's the next step in the process? And how can we keep all of those things really consistent so that it reinforces that experience for the customer?
Yeah. That's exactly what we just completely revamped. Our After somebody purchases one of our offers, let's say our VIP day offer, the checkout process then takes them to a thank you page, and not just a simple thank you page, but there's actually a welcome video. There's like next steps, how to get started. So 1, 2, 3, next steps. And there's even a couple of podcast episodes I put on that page for just to get them started with ideas. So we've
Yeah.
actually made like an onboarding page, and it doesn't even stop there. We actually also just you haven't seen this, Ruthie, but we also just made a welcome client portal, which is actually set up as functionally it's set up as a course in Kajabi or a product in Kajabi, but
Hmm.
it's a whole client welcome portal where it walks them through all the steps we need for their project. So onboarding steps. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. There's a resources library. There's a place where they can see my favorite partners, my favorite marketing strategists or my favorite copywriters. And there's a couple other things in there,
Oh,
but
I love
that's,
that.
yeah. And so that was a whole fun thing that we did to really even take our own client experience, which I think was really quite well developed, even to a new level. So it's
Hmm.
always something you can continue to improve your client experience.
Yeah. And that's something that when I work with business owners and we talk about content strategy, a lot of times we also want to think about content strategy from a retention perspective. The marketing funnel, attract, nurture, convert, it doesn't stop at convert. What we actually want to do is we want to inverse and continue to nurture so that we can retain those clients. And like, okay, let's say you're a business that does one and done type services. People are not going to, use your business again. Well, they can refer you. They could become a raving fan. And so thinking about that experience as part of the marketing funnel and in your content strategy, thinking about, I love that you linked helpful podcasts and resources, because then that's using content in a really strategic way to nurture those relationships and retain those customers and elevate that overall experience.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely.
Any other mistakes that you see people make online that are kind of some of the common, like when you DIY it or when you maybe haven't done an audit for a while? I love that you shared, your Instagram and your website not matching, but any other kind of common mistakes that you see people make with their branding?
Yes, I see a lot of mistakes, but it's opportunities for improvement. So one thing is simply once you have sort of decided on your branding, either if you've DIY'd it or you hired a professional, is really being consistent with that branding and not then going and mixing up the colors and fonts a couple months later. Even though you might be bored of it, your audience is not. And like we talked about, that repetition is so important. So I do see it happen a lot on Instagram feeds, even for clients where we've done the branding, is they mix and match fonts and templates and random things from Canva, and then they sort of lose and it distills that clear branding that we had at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big mistake I see. The Instagram feed. Then from there, I see the biggest mistake is that link in bio. I know it's really popular to put multiple links there, and I'm sure there's data out there, and I will go look at it, but I think it's more effective to have one link that goes exactly to the place where you want people to go right now.
Mm-hmm.
So having one link to your core offer, if you're in a promotion period, is going to increase your applications or increase your results with this launch. I've tested it with myself, and I have seen it more effective like this. So
Yeah.
that's a mistake. Another mistake is after you. Another mistake is, let's say you've sold. Let's say you're selling a course, and you've sold the course. They've signed the person has signed up for the course, but then not thinking about the experience after that. So I see a lot of course portals, whether it's Kajabi or whether it's other course platforms, where the branding and that is not consistent with your website and your social media. So let's say you have a great website, you have great social media, but you didn't really think about the course branding. And there's details in there where there's still like default colors, default fonts that just don't match your branding. It matches whatever platform it is. So that's
I
one I see a
I have
lot.
regularly seen people with both the portal and even like a deliverable. Like you can, like they used a Canva template. Great. We should all be using Canva templates. They save time. But there's like filler text in one of
Mm.
the little spots. And I think that's another one of those, like, have someone else audit it for you. Have someone else look over it, because you like your brain knows what it should see and it sees it. And so when there's things that like get missed or looked over, it's helpful to have another set of eyes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So when it comes to branding, walk me through a little bit for somebody who has maybe like they've got some branding. Like they've got colors, they've got fonts, but they're like, I don't really know. What are some of the questions you ask when you work with somebody to elevate that branding and kind of take it to the next level, or some things that we should consider to elevate our overall brand presence?
Oh, I love this question. So, the thing that makes you stand out is you. And that sounds cliche, but what I mean is it's your personality, it's your unique background, it's your unique characteristics. And so I think digging deeper in yourself on what that can look like, or what your personality is, and really understanding that, and it's still important to keep your ideal client in mind through this whole process, but I think really pulling out a few characteristics or things about yourself that make you unique, and bringing that into your branding, so bringing that into your messaging, your photography, your brand photos. Maybe it relates to your colors, maybe not. Bring that into your Instagram posts, and just your messaging, yeah, your like captions and your writing on your website. That is going to help you stand out, and really help you position you in the market as unique. So I
Yeah.
can give examples because I think it's maybe hard to understand. It might be hard to visualize, but for example, I my background is in architecture, and I
Mhm.
also have this obsession and love of Europe. That's why I moved to Europe and have lived here ever since. So I do bring that in strategically, both the architecture piece, and the European thing into my Instagram posts and my messaging. I mean, it's my passion and I love it, but it also helps me stand out in the design space.
Mhm.
So that's just one example.
Yeah. Um, I will share a resource. Kelsey Curtis, who is a brand photographer, she has a book called The Connection Method, and she walks you through
Mm-hmm.
determining your branding words. And the reason that I love that strategy is, as you're growing, you're building, you've maybe DIY'd some stuff and you're ready to bring on a web designer or a social media manager or a copywriter. Having those words out of your head and on paper makes such a difference in helping that professional quickly understand your brand and deliver better, whatever the deliverable is. Again, it could be photography, it could be web design, it could be social media management, it could be copywriting, but to be able to say, hey, these keywords are what my brand is all about. This is the tone that I want my audience to feel and hear when they consume my content or interact with my brand, because there's a million different directions we could go. So knowing those keywords, and like you said, knowing those little nuances that are interesting and unique to you. I think about my brand, like I don't watch reality TV. I don't. Like I'm not into it. And so when the trend is like everybody's talking about the Real Housewives and Selling Sunset and these other shows that I don't watch, like I'm not going to, because I that's not me. And if I were to bring on a copywriter, they might think like, oh, this is who your ideal audience is into and this is what they watch. So let's bring in some copyright that. But like, that's not me. And so then it dilutes the brand to like, well, who are you and who is this person? So getting really clear on that stuff, I agree, is so important.
Yeah, yeah. I'm also not a reality TV show, so you will not see me referencing that.
It's
But
so
yeah, it's so important.
It's so funny. I watched it when I was younger, like in my 20s, which that's embarrassing how long ago that was. But it just got to the point that I was like, I don't have the mental capacity for this drama. I don't need additional drama in my life. Let's remove that. And so like I'm aware, I know it's out there, but I'm not watching it. So that's funny. You don't watch it either.
So fun.
So okay, my last question to kind of tie up our conversation about branding. What would you say is the number one way to start attracting high quality leads and actually convert your audience into paying clients? And I know that's like a super loaded question because there's not one thing, but what's one thing we could try?
I would get clear on your one offer. I mean,
Mm.
I almost would have said like you need to be consistent across everything, but that's like your whole branding. That's your whole messaging. I know consistency, but I would get really clear on your one offer. What is your one offer, and make it absolutely the best in the world, the best in your niche, and that might take some trial and error, but
Mhm.
become the best. Master one offer, build it up. I would say build it up to 6 figures of income from the one offer, and and when you can really focus on one offer, then you're able to focus on that client experience every step of the way. You can get down your processes, your workflow, the automations, the email, the onboarding, everything to make it really the best in class.
I am so glad you said that because I can share being in like season 2 of my business. Like we can call it the sophomore season with whatever. I focused on a lot of different offers and threw a lot of things out there and like nothing really stuck. And then what I realized was that I was talking about too many things. I wasn't becoming known for anything. And it became harder even to elevate the client experience across those offers when I did have conversions because I was trying to do too many things. So I absolutely love that advice of like, get one core offer, get it validated, and then we can layer in and build from there. I know because I can speak from experience, it's hard. You look around the online space and you think like a course, a membership, a one-on-one, a workshop, a masterclass, a this, a that. And like we think we have to do all the things. You don't have to do all the things. Pick one and know that if it doesn't give you a $600,000 launch the first time, that's normal. It's normal to launch it a few times before you get it right, before the messaging is sticking. And so I really appreciate that advice of like, get really good at one.
Yeah, yeah, the one offer method. This is what I followed in my business. But after many years of having also many offers or many services. So
Mhm.
yes, that's perfect example because that's the opposite of what will happen when you're not really focused on one.
Yeah.
And I think you can layer it on after you really have got one down.
Yes, absolutely. And that's where, from a scaling perspective, you can start thinking about outsourcing, having a team, systems and processes, and then you can get really good at another offer. If it
Mhm.
feels hard to sell a lot of things at once, it's because it is hard. So let's make it easier by streamlining it. So I love
Yes,
that.
yes,
Well,
absolutely.
these were all such great tips when it comes to our brand experience and client experience. And before we wrap, I've got a couple of questions we ask all of our guests just to get to know you a little bit better. And we always talk about brand values here on the podcast. So I'd love to know, what is one of your brand values and how did you land on that?
I would say resilience is one of my biggest brand values, and really getting up after you fail. So picking yourself up after you've had a massive fail. I've had plenty of those in my career, and I think being resilient towards that and being determined towards what is your passion and really moving forward even after those road bumps is
Yeah,
one of
that's
mine.
so good. I do a word of the year every year.
Mhm.
And I'm like starting to think about what my 2024 word might be. I love resilience. I'm gonna add that to my list of considerations.
Brainstorming.
So good. All right. And then also, because one of my brand values is growth mindset and personal development, I always love to ask our guests, what is a favorite personal development book or podcast of yours? And if you can't pick a favorite, because you're like me and you have a million favorites, something that you've read or listened to recently that really spoke to you.
Yeah, I do have a current favorite. I love the 5 a.m. Club, the book, the 5 a.m. Club. And, I have two small children. One is just turned 2 years old. So it's not always possible for me to wake up at 5 a.m., but I just love the mentality and the sort of mindset behind this book.
Yeah, that's a great book. There's a lot of
Yeah,
really good
it's
tips
hard to choose.
in there. Yeah, for sure. I love it. Okay. And then because we are the consistency corner and we love to chat about consistency, I always like to ask our guests, what's something that you're really consistent with, either in your business or your personal life that you're really proud of? And
Okay.
I will tell you too, I remind everybody of this, consistent doesn't have to mean constant.
Hmm.
So if it's not constant, that's okay.
I am very consistent about checking my click up. I don't know. In my business, I'm very consistent about checking ClickUp and always responding to my team efficiently. I think team is one of the most important things for for the success of my business. I really try to support my team, but that's not a very fun answer. So, in my personal life, I would say I've been fairly consistent with. I do a lot of language studying, and I am fairly consistent with language studying, and
Yeah.
it's a big passion of mine.
Yeah, I love that. I am not consistent with ClickUp.
Oh,
And
really? Okay.
I I understand the value of it. I totally see it. And once I start growing my team, I know we're going to have to get ClickUp under control. But right now, I kind of gave up and walked away, and I'm still using pen and paper. But we'll get back to it eventually because
Mhm,
it
mhm.
is a great tool.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I am also consistent about my paper planner.
Mhm.
I use both, so it's
Yes,
okay.
yes,
What-
100%. Awesome. Well, Elizabeth, tell our listeners where they can connect with you, where you hang out online, if they'd like to learn more and chat or learn more about working with you.
Yeah, absolutely. The best place is my website. It's studioclassica.com. So Studio Classica with an A at the end.com. And that's where you can learn about what we offer in the design space for online coaches and female entrepreneurs. And on Instagram, you can find me. It's my name, Elizabeth Averyanova, Averyanova.
Yes.
And I am occasionally on Instagram, and sometimes I take long Instagram breaks.
Well, we will link everything in the show notes, but I will give a shout out that you have a
Yes.
beautiful website and do beautiful website work. So if anybody needs support with brand design, sales pages, or web design, Elizabeth and her team are absolutely fantastic. And I loved working with you guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ruthie.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. And it was great having you in such a good conversation.
Yes, I loved it. Thanks so much.